here's my plan on exactly when and where I'll be buying Bitcoin for the month of April. Of course, I want to preface this whole video by stating, hey, look, I can be massively fucking wrong about all of this. In fact, it's very, very possible that I'll be 100% wrong about it. However, I do really like a nice risk to reward setup that is occurring for Bitcoin on the higher term time frame look. So with that in mind, we'll be going over what that essentially looks like. Of course, in yesterday's video, we were looking for a very, very small bounce to open up this month of April, mostly based off of traditional markets. That's already played out. So if you're watching yesterday's video, that's done. It's kaput. And now it does look like Bitcoin wants to try a little bit of short-term downside as well. In fact, I would say in general, Bitcoin is still very much risky and still very much a big question mark and still very much on the precipice of even confirming a major bear market cycle, like a year's worth of price action sideways and down. If it does confirm, one of the conditions that we'll go over a little bit later. But for right now, Hopium is alive. Again, as long as Bitcoin is above the March lows. Hopium is not confirmed, however, especially as long as Bitcoin's below last week's high. And I would even extend that to about 92,800. But anyways, today is Liberation Day. And because it is a big event that, a lot of people have been putting a lot of emphasis on, there is uncertainty. And there's a lot of uncertainty. And when markets are uncertain, they typically respond with downside volatility. So I do expect that things get, a little bit weirder between now and probably the end of the week. But after the initial reaction, I do expect a counter move. So in this case, again, short term, I actually still am looking for some downside here, but there is starting to exist a nice setup actually. So first things first, let's go over the short term downside because I do think that Bitcoin has a little bit more downside here to go, even if you're the biggest bull of all time. Well, if you're the biggest bull of all time, then obviously you're just going to be bullish from here. But you get my point. Like my point is that even if you're the biggest bull of all time, we actually do expect a little bit of a try lower here to open up the month of April. Why do I say that? Well, if we could put it into just one very simplistic chart, it would be this one right here, the quarterly chart for Bitcoin. And I want to focus in on that red moving average. That's a 5 exponential moving average. And the reason why it is relevant here is because we've never seen 2 consecutive non-touches to the moving average. That's a very long way of saying it reconnects almost on each and every period, which is again a quarterly right here, and we've never seen more than one in a row, or just more than one, meaning that there's never been 2 in a row. And in this case, we did see that last quarter did not reconnect, so we do expect to reconnect at some point this quarter. That can happen multiple ways. One, it could happen with price action literally just coming down to meet it, and that would currently be just above Bitcoin's Q1 lows. And the other way is that Bitcoin gets so fucking girthy and green from here that it pulls it up just by the sheer strength of it. I don't think that particular scenario is going to actually occur. I do think that Bitcoin is a lot more likely, or at least I'd be betting on Bitcoin coming down a little bit closer to that red moving average at least. But again, you can backtest this yourself, just by using your eyes here. It's pretty damn simple. Again, you will not find more than one that did not reconnect with the red moving average over any piece of time in Bitcoin's history. And again, that is just above this the Q1 lows. Anyways, from there, I do want to get into when essentially am I expecting this to happen? Well, for that, we can go back into our dates data right here for April, and we find that if April is going to be a bullish month, then we do expect lows coming in probably before the end of the first week is over, actually. And we're already 2 days into this first week, so that does correlate well with sort of the short term being more uncertain and more likely to try some downside. But I would say that, hey, look, on average, the median here, we do expect around 7 days. So that would be a good sort of line in the sand to be having, that if we see Bitcoin make new lows in April, like new lows relative to the April open is what I mean, by that time, by the end of the first week, basically in 5 days from now, then that's going to be an indication that Bitcoin it's not going to be playing out the bullish scenario that we're hoping for here. But yes, that's kind of when we'd be expecting this to happen. We expect it early within this month, probably before the end of this first week. If we do see Bitcoin come lower after this first week, I'd say my conviction starts to really go by the wayside. Anyways, we've gone through that. Let's also talk about how low. We kind of briefly mentioned it here. We kind of briefly mentioned it here with the quarterly reconnect anywhere just above last quarter's low is completely fine. But can we get a little bit more surgical with this? Well, if we go over here to the monthly HPDR, we can see that on CME, it is actually still maintaining closures above the median. And if Bitcoin did come down to test the median, that'd still be okay. The median as of right now for CME on the monthly is 79,900. So I would say, in a more precise manner, probably closer to there, 79,900, just basically $80,000. Can you get a wick below? Yeah, but we don't really expect it to deviate too much. Certainly not below March's just general low at 76,700. Anyways, from there, we can also extrapolate some of this data from our April statistics regarding the open to the low. So what I've done here is I've measured all prior April's versus their open versus their lows. Again, that's not the same thing as open versus close, but just the open versus the low, and found that for positive closing Aprils, we typically don't expect that much of a drop from the open, again, assuming that April is going to close positively. So this would be the bullish view of it. And on average, we expect about 3.5%, delta, essentially. So a 3.5% drawdown there. And we already have this month's open for, of course, April. And if Bitcoin were to play out about 3.5% to the downside, where would that put Bitcoin? Oh, what do you know? 79,500. So now we're seeing multiple things line up from about the same area. It's still a little bit lower than what we're currently at. I mean, Bitcoin as of right now is trading at $84,000, but just basically between 79 to 80,000 bucks is like the high quality area. That is still what I'm waiting for. Yes, I bought for my long-term bags already, just spot positions, but that's only because Bitcoin is 30% off of its high. I'm just gonna invest in that anyways. But as far as the trade goes, I'm still looking for this one to come a little bit lower. And on top of that, I want to bring up this as well. Okay, so we went over the we went over the HPDR over here. The other thing, of course, is the hash ribbons, which we were focusing on quite a bit. Wait, damn it, it's not bringing it up right there. Let me just type it back in here. But another thing suggesting that, hey, look, Bitcoin can come back down close to that last major low, but we really don't want to see a closure below there. Otherwise, all the bullish hopium gets completely fucking nullified. Until then, there is a setup that does exist, but for right now, that is completely contingent upon Bitcoin remaining above that March low. And again, if you're not familiar with why I focus so much on this for especially like long-term plays, is that anytime we've seen that blue buy signal that gets confirmed on the daily, and then especially if it gets confirmed as well on the 5-day, whenever that fires off, generally the last major higher low within Bitcoin's overall uptrend is the low before never going below it ever again. That's happened 20 prior times we've gotten this signal. Out of those 20 times, 17 have played out in that fashion, meaning that 3 have failed. So it can fail. It can fail. We actually saw it fail in 2022, obviously. But even then, from the signal given to the next high, it was about a 50% move. So, it wasn't anything small. Even the one that preceded the Rona dump as well. I mean, this one did have I think a 50% move to the upside as well. Let me just double check here. 50 to 60% move to the upside. So my point is that, even if you're super bearish, it is kind of likely that Bitcoin does pop up here. And I guess if you're bearish, you're just looking for another lower high. But anyways, moving on from there, we've now answered the question when. We expect it early within the month. Where? Somewhere between like 79 to 80. We definitely know it is not going to be below the March lows. If Bitcoin goes below the March lows, big fucking problems. But that does offer up the nice opportunity for, a very favorable risk to reward, meaning that, if Bitcoin comes back down around here, let's call it again, let's call it 79 to 81,000 bucks. Give it a little bit more of a wide berth there. If Bitcoin does come down around there, again, it's not 100% guaranteed that this is going to work out, but it does offer up a very obvious risk management point, which would be that, again, that March low, meaning that the closer that we can enter, or the closer that I can enter towards that, you can do whatever the fuck you want to do, but the closer that I enter towards that, the less that I actually have to risk in order to figure out if my trade is not going to work out in this particular scenario. So yes, that's basically what I'm going off of right there. Now, like I said, all of this can fail, and there's actually really good reason to be on the bearish side of this right now. The reason why I say that is because when we go to, again, all of our higher term time frame stochastic momentum oscillators, we're seeing reads that are pretty consistent with downside markets, to be honest. The monthly stochastic oscillators nosediving here in the same way that we saw from the past few cycle highs. It will continue to the downside as long as Bitcoin's closing below $106,000. It actually moved up from March to April as far as that pivot goes. The quarterly, which just closed obviously 2 days ago, is going to also turn down at the end of this quarter. So not happening anytime soon, but just something to kind of be aware of later on. If Bitcoin's below 93,000 bucks, I would go as far to say that if Bitcoin pops above even 93, it's probably fine. I think that it is fine at that point. I think that I think that the bullish route is confirmed, actually even a little bit before then. But yes, as long as Bitcoin's below, which it is right now by almost $10,000, there is real risk to the downside. And on top of that, we got the bi-monthly time frame closing at the end of this month. This one's also a little bit problematic here, just because we have seen all of the prior cross downs on this bi-monthly stochastic momentum chart correlating essentially with highs of market cycles. This one was basically at the high, more or less at the high. Yes, it did move a little bit higher after that, but again, it was a damn good indication that the cycle was running on fumes at that point. So yes, there's that. On top of that, I did want to bring up this as well. So if we go back to traditional markets, if traditional markets come down from here, then we kind of expect Bitcoin to do the same thing. They do seem to be quite correlated on the downside, not as much on the upside. And I think NASDAQ and SPY futures, for that matter, are still easier charts, similar to yesterday. It's like it was easy to call a bounce yesterday, but bounce is not the same thing as like massive reversal. The higher term timeframes are still like very problematic here. I fucking hate using that word, but very problematic. But you know what I mean. Anyways, I need to figure out a new dictionary to reference. But yeah, what I wanted to call out here is that we do see the monthly MACD for NASDAQ futures actually having a cross down, and this will, it will follow through. We saw a similar signal actually leading into the last major, I would call this correction. It's not really a bear market. I mean, Jesus, it was like a year of downside, but that was back in 2022. And basically, anytime that we've seen this MACD cross on the monthly, it has at least led to a pretty decent correction. I'm having trouble finding a scenario where that did not happen. I guess right here, there was kind of a one-off where it did not, but that MACD reading was also very muted compared to the sort of craziness that we're seeing over here. So, it's like, is this chart more likely to go to the upside or the downside? It's more likely to go to the downside. Does that mean that Bitcoin's more likely to go to the downside? Well, probably, and if this thing comes down like another 5 or 10%, what's Bitcoin going to do? Well, it already did 30% from the high, and traditional markets did like 15. So if we assume like a 2-to-1 relationship, then that's going to be big numbers, and certainly bring it down below the March low. Again, I need to see a closure below the March low in order for me to get like full on bearish, looking for somewhere around $50,000 give or take overall, with bounces along the way. But but like I said, and like I'll continue to repeat, as long as Bitcoin is above the March lows, the hopium is still alive. There is potential for a pretty massive risk reward trade, in the same way that we saw back from last year over here, similar setup, and also the year prior to that in 2023 was right here. Doesn't mean that they're always going to work out, but if you have been following this channel for a long time now, you've seen these things work out in the past, and this is kind of how I would position around it if I'm looking to take advantage of such things. Anyways, this is all to say, again, in the very, very short term, Bitcoin probably having a little bit of downside tries here. We just don't want to see below, again, 76,700. Especially leading up into this event. So I think that is where I'll end things for today. Yeah, that's where I'll end things for today. We answered all the questions. So I'll sign off on that note. Oh, one last thing, actually. I did forget to mention that we actually are going to be raising the price of the quantum wave bands here, but we're going to be, of course, providing more on top of that. We're actually going to be adding something that we've been working on for a long time, which is a trending strategy. Right now, it's just scalping strategies. And then also, we're going to be having just a very specific Discord channel for the quantum wave band users as well, if you want to, ask questions and these sort of things. Now, these changes will be enacted at the end of this month, April. And like I said, the price will go up about $20 from 70 to 90, or literally $20 from 70 to 90. But if you do get in now, you can lock in that lower price. You will get all of the upgrades that come at the end of this month. But I just want to start to prepare people at the beginning of this month, so there's plenty of time before that change happens and there's no surprises. And of course, you can even take the free trial on this and actually lock yourself into that lower price as well if you just want to give it a try. And I think for a lot of people, it can be very, very valuable, especially if you're newer. It gives you an idea of what of what an actual trading plan will look like, and gives you essentially bumper rails or training wheels for playing out a strategy. So it can be very, very nice to build off of. But here's a 30-minute time frame right here. You can see small loss on this last move down, followed by small win, followed by another small win. Looks like it hasn't done anything else in the past day. The hourly time frame is pretty similar here, actually. Small loss right here, small gain, decent gain actually on yesterday. Caught the pretty much the full move actually. Not always going to work like that. And I don't know about this entry right here. I think that one's probably going to be a loss, but that's just my opinion. Anyways, the focus here is on the long term, and that is that is the power of following a strategy like this, is that it gives you a sort of guide for the long term that you can play out. And again, you can iterate on top of this. I'm sure that people will start to come to their own ideas after you've referenced this for a long time, but it's good. It's pretty damn good to start with. And again, get it for 30 days free. Figure out if it's for you or not. And we'll sign off on that note. As always, I want to wish everyone the best of best. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully tomorrow.